Dr. Albrecht.
What dire and momentous times we are living through. And yet despite that, America still has that sense of freedom. And I got to tell you, being in this momentous hall and noting that this hall still stands and that that feeling of liberty still beats in our hearts, I think is a testament to something much, much bigger than this country, much, much bigger than this whole global agenda, and much bigger than the forces that we fight against. Speaking of this hall, I want to thank our organizers. I guess I am the last speaker, so I guess this privilege falls to me. I want to thank Walter Reddy for bringing all of these wonderful speakers together, for all of your work behind the scenes. I want to thank Tom Moore for being an incredible MC, Master of Ceremonies. I want to thank all of the speakers who have flown in here from all over the country and given up their weekends to spend them here in Boston with us. And above all, I want to thank each of you for being here. And speaking of each of you, who are you? All right, I know a couple of things about you. I know that you've got that beating heart of liberty in your chest. But I'll tell you something I don't know about you. I don't know your names, other than a handful of folks who I've met before at previous events. I don't know your names. And you know what? That's a good thing. Yeah. I'll tell you why. Because there are plans afoot to where no group would be able to gather in a tavern, in Faneuil Hall, anywhere without someone watching them, without someone having given them permission to travel to the location where they're going to be meeting together, without someone giving them permission to open the door or walk through the door or even take a seat, without someone watching them everywhere they go. It's a frightening vision, it's a very real vision, and it's a vision the infrastructure for which is being put into place right now as we speak. And I know we've had a lot of incredible speakers talking about a lot of issues, and all of this is going to hinge on sort of the nuts and bolts of putting it all together, all of the global tyranny that's coming. And I guess with my background and my interest in technology, I've kind of been the person looking at the nuts and the bolts. I've been peering behind the system, trying to figure out how they will implement all of these grand schemes, whether they're schemes for controlling the population by controlling the vote. And when you get people figuring that out, they start to want to revolt, whether they're schemes to keep people from traveling to meet in places like this, schemes to keep people under control when the economy melts down, whatever those schemes are, they're going to require pieces in place to make them work. All right, well, let me tell you that this gathering here today is probably exactly the kind of gathering that will be clamped down on, maybe first. And even today, had I chosen to, I could have taken my bag, which is actually sitting over there. I could have put an RFID reader in it. I could have put it in the doorway, and as you walked by, I could have scanned anything that you were wearing or carrying with an RFID tag in it. Right? Now, for those of you, I assume most people in the room are familiar with RFID, but let me describe it to you. Radio frequency identification technology, tiny microchips hooked up to miniature antennas that the world's global corporations, the biggest corporations in the globe, the Nestle's, the Procter & Gamble's, the Walmarts, the Home Depots, you name it, they're all involved. They all want to replace the barcode with these tiny tracking devices so that there would be one in every physical object manufactured on Earth, rendering everything uniquely identifiable and remotely trackable. Now, when I say remotely, I'm not talking about from satellites, although they may be getting to that point at some point in the future. I'm talking about trackable from about 20 or 30 feet away. Certainly trackable from enough distance that as you walk through a doorway, I could track and identify you and make an inventory of every object that you're wearing and carrying. Now, I first found out about this back in 2002, and I founded an organization, co-authored a book, and have done over 2,000 media interviews on this, trying to alert the American people and the world's people about it. And even today, only about 5% of people, according to polls, have ever even heard of RFID or have any clue what it is. Nevertheless, we've waged some big battles, and we've been very effective in stopping those RFID tags from appearing in your clothing. There is a very good chance that there is no RFID tag in your shoes right now, even though there are companies that were manufacturing them and actually testing them out as early as, well, 3 or 4 years ago, or as recently. There is a good chance that there's no RFID tag in your shirt label, because we fought against that too. But as we were fighting the inclusion of RFID into your belongings so that companies like IBM could implement their patented person tracking unit and put reader devices everywhere in museums and theaters and libraries and sports arenas and shopping malls and elevators and public restrooms to track us all with this technology, we fought back against the tagging of your belongings. Well, they went around us, and they went straight for the tagging of people through their identity documents, which really is the end game of this whole thing. So for those of you who've been following my work, I'm here to give you kind of a depressing update, which is that the RFID tag is coming. It is here. There are now over 100,000 people in the United States who are carrying RFID tagged driver's licenses. So you thought it was bad in your shoes or your Calvin Klein shirt. It's nothing compared to having it in your wallet and in your driver's license. So again, our battle has been sort of like holding an umbrella up against a hurricane. We've kept a little tiny patch of ground dry, but the rest of it is raging on. Let me tell you about the program, the border crossing cards. There is in the states of Washington and in New York right now a program where you can pay an extra $40 when you go to the DMV to renew your driver's license, and they'll give you a special driver's license, a privileged driver's license that has an RFID chip in it. So you won't have to be like all those unwashed masses waiting at the border to get into Canada or Mexico. You can put your little RFID tag driver's license on your windshield, and from 20, 30, 40 feet away, the border guard will know you're coming. And he can already pull up all your details, your photograph and your birth date and your place of birth and all your information right there on his screen. And you don't have to do a thing. You just drive right on by, and then you still have to show him the ID when you get there, but he just waves you on through. So this is part of a progression that I've seen across the board in a lot of different areas, which is taking something that we would not accept, that we would fight tooth and nail or pitchfork and gun if it were imposed upon us, and instead turning it around and making it into a privilege, and then making people pay for the opportunity to participate. And it's part of a bigger picture. I'd like you to watch for it, because you're probably going to see it coming up in other arenas as well. All right, because I know a lot of you are familiar with my work on microchip implants, let me speak about that as well. So we have successfully, at least for the time being, fought off RFID tags in products, but there is an implantable version of the radio frequency ID chip known as the Vera chip. It's the one they put into dogs and cats, and up until last year, it was the one that they were planning on putting into Alzheimer's patients, and ultimately, if they got their way, into every person on the globe. Speaking of winning battles, we did win a major victory over the Vera chip when I was able to uncover close to a dozen different documents indicating that these microchips cause cancer when they're implanted into mice and rats. Between 1 and 10% of those animals develop cancer when you put a microchip implant into them. And that put a big sort of a pall over the microchip industry with the plans of implanting human beings. So they had to go back to the drawing board. The good news there is we watched the stock value of the Verichip Corporation drop from over $11 a share to today, when it is 2 steps away from the pink sheets, trading for just pennies a share. So good news there. Unfortunately, we're not out of the woods, because the thing that the microchip, I think, inspires fear in all of us about is this idea that we'll come to a point where we have to show identification or have some sort of a verification mark on our bodies in order to do basic things. And we are coming to that point. Think about some of the basic rights that even as children, we took for granted. Certainly our parents and grandparents took for granted. The ability to travel, for example. When was the last time you were able to get on an airplane without showing identification and receiving permission by a government body? We're going to begin to see this under the Obama administration in more and more places. We're going to see it under health care. We're going to see it as we move to national health care, and how well you care for your health affects my tax rates because I'm going to be paying for your health care under a national health care plan. We're going to start seeing this with regard to employment, where you won't be able to get a job without showing your government identity document, probably in the form of a real ID driver's license, and most likely with an RFID tag in it. We're going to start seeing this with regard to housing. Already there are places in the country where, because of illegal immigration, they've passed ordinances saying that you cannot rent an apartment or buy a home without proving your acceptability as an American citizen. So as they begin raising the bar higher and higher and requiring these documents for more and more activities, it becomes seriously worrisome, I gotta say. All right, I mentioned the steps to a loss of a right. I want to talk about those real quick because I want you to see them coming across the board. First, there's a decision that something needs to be watched, and the control mechanisms get set up to watch it. You can think about this in terms of travel, you can think about this in terms of employment, or you can think about it where I focus my energy, which is on the retail sector, things you can buy. Ultimately, they will be controlling that as well. Then they ask for volunteers for the watching system and make it a privilege. In the buying and selling, they say, hey, we want to reward you with a frequent shopper card. Sign up. We'll give you discounts. You'll be part of an exclusive club. Or in the case of border crossing RFID spy chip driver's licenses, they say, well, you're going to have to fill out a special form and jump through a lot of hoops. And if you do that and pay $40, we'll let you have the privilege of carrying a remotely readable driver's license that we can read right through your pocket from 60 feet away. You see it occurring in more and more places. The Trusted Traveler program. Well, we'll let you sign up if you apply for a special program and give us an iris scan and fingerprints and all sorts of personal information. And then we'll let you go to the front of the traveler screening line and you won't be standing there in the back. Or we'll give you the privilege of allowing you to have a PayPass transponder on your windshield so you can zip right through the fast lane on the freeway and not have to stop and pay cash. Well, once they get about 80% of people on board as volunteers, and those of you who live in Massachusetts, how many people are Massachusetts residents? Okay. I hate to ask the next question. How many of you have a toll transponder on your car? Yeah, you're the brave ones who'll admit it, yeah. Well, once you got about 80% of people voluntarily doing things like putting a tracking device on their car, then you start squeezing the 20% of holdouts and you make it mandatory. And that's exactly what your governor just announced is about to happen in the state of Massachusetts. You will no longer be able to drive through a toll booth without either having a transponder tracking device on your car, or the government will take a photograph of your license plate, and of course they know who you are and where you live, and they'll just send you a bill in the mail. So once you get 80% of people voluntarily going along, the other 20%, you just squeeze them a little bit. And everybody else goes, well, what's your problem? I've had one on my car for 5 years. I've had a supermarket shopper card. What's the big deal? I've got the border crossing card. How come you guys are holding out? All right, at that point, then they make that registration mandatory. Then your next step, and again, ratcheting it up just a little bit, boiling the frog. Think about guns here. Your next step is then you start requiring certain people, or you start setting apart certain people and saying, you can't have this privilege. You're not allowed to own a gun because X, Y, and Z, or you're not allowed to buy that Haagen-Dazs ice cream because we're concerned about your insurance rates, or we're concerned about that heart condition that you have. You start setting the bar a little bit higher and deciding certain people can't do it. Certain convicted felons may not be able to enter into certain areas. And then at that point, pretty much things are beginning to break down. And your final stage is when they say no one will be allowed to do fill in the blank, buy at the supermarket, travel, go on a freeway, go on a toll road, whatever it might be, without government permission. And at that point, you're enslaved. That's the way it happens. There's a very steady progression. You can watch it happening across the board. And everything that you now think of as a right, think about down the road becoming a privilege and then becoming something that only the elite are able to do. All right. In the course of the last couple of hours, we've heard a lot of talk about the Bible. We opened this discussion today with a prayer. Our founding fathers had an abiding belief in God, and the Bible was one of the founding documents, or one of the guiding documents during the foundation of this great republic. Well, I'll tell you one thing that the Bible does talk about, and you can't talk about these technologies of requiring people to identify themselves to engage in all sorts of basic behaviors without talking about the fact that the Bible discusses that as well. And in the book of Revelation, the last book of the Bible, there is a statement in there, or a prediction in there, that there will be a time when all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and bond, or imprisoned or enslaved, will be required to have a mark on their right hand or their forehead. That would be the mark or the number of the beast, the name or the number of the beast, without which they cannot buy or sell. Now, this has kind of come down through popular culture. You can hear about it in rock lyrics and all the rest as the mark of the beast. But I'll tell you one thing, as a Christian, I believe it's coming, and I believe it's coming fast. I'll tell you something else, though. As an American, I believe it's not going to come without a hell of a fight. Yeah. All right, I opened this talk asking who you are, and I don't know your names, but I do know one thing about every person in this room. You are a patriot, you love your country, and you love freedom. I've traveled all over the world. I've addressed the European Union. I've spoken to the privacy commissioners of virtually every country on this globe. I've lived in Mexico. I've been everywhere. And I have to say that despite all the problems going on in these United States, and all the reasons that I shake my fist at our elected leaders, and all the reasons I get frustrated at all my fellow Americans for not fighting back in the right way and in the right time, and all the frustrations that we feel, I'll tell you, every time I come back to this country, I want to kiss the ground. I absolutely, when I get off that plane, Logan Airport, Manchester Airport, I say, thank the good Lord that I'm home. And there's a reason for that. That's because the heart of liberty across this globe beats in this country. It beats in your chest. It beats in the chest of the person sitting next to you. And that is not the case elsewhere. That is not the case in other countries. They embrace their chains. But in this country, people are getting restless, and thank the good Lord that is the case. Because that's the only way we're going to change this. I believe that those of us sitting in this room, those of us who are part of this great awakening across this nation, those of us who are beginning to cry out for freedom, who are beginning to understand what has been done to us, that we are the last and the greatest hope for freedom across this globe. This stuff is coming. It's coming fast. It's frightening. It's heavy. But I believe that larger desire, that larger hope, that larger freedom across this globe is bigger. I really do believe that. All right, in conclusion, let me say that by the grace of God, I truly hope that we will all rise to the occasion and do these founding fathers proud. Thank you.